Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people aren't broke because they don't earn enough. They're broke because they've been played by their own psychology. And the tragic part, they're still playing along, thinking they're winning. I've spent 8 decades watching intelligent people, engineers, doctors, lawyers, work themselves into exhaustion while staying financially mediocre. It's not an income problem, it's a thinking problem, and thinking problems are the most expensive kind. The middle class has mastered one devastating art, looking rich while staying average. Nice cars financed at rates they don't understand. Kitchen renovations paid for with home equity lines. Vacations funded by credit cards that charge interest most people can't calculate. They call this lifestyle. I call it a slow-motion financial suicide with excellent staging. You see, the system doesn't want you rich. It wants you comfortable, just comfortable enough to keep consuming, just anxious enough to keep working. The banks smile when you sign the mortgage. The government collects when you earn. The corporations sell you another shiny object when you're bored. Everyone's getting rich except you, and you're too busy upgrading your prison to notice the bars. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Wealth isn't about what you earn. It's about what's left after you subtract stupidity. The middle class calls their mortgage an investment. They call their car a necessity. They call their credit card rewards free money. That's not financial literacy. That's self-delusion with paperwork. When I was young during the Depression, people saved first and spent later. They understood something fundamental. Money doesn't care about your feelings. Today's middle class does the opposite. They spend first and pray the future will somehow be richer. They've confused motion with progress, activity with achievement. You know what happens when an entire society lives beyond its means? It doesn't become prosperous. It becomes a collection of well-dressed slaves, not to kings, but to creditors. I've watched this movie replay itself, generation after generation. Smart people work 60-hour weeks just to maintain the consequences of their own bad decisions. They don't own their homes. Their mortgages own them. They don't drive their cars. Their loans drive their choices. That's not success. That's a treadmill with marble flooring, and the middle class keeps running faster, wondering why they never arrive anywhere. The average American can't handle boredom. They crave stimulation, even if it costs them their future. So they swipe, upgrade, refinance, and repeat. They'll spend 30 years paying for a home, but never spend 30 minutes understanding compound interest. They'll know the horsepower of their car, but not the interest rate on their credit card. This isn't ignorance. It's chosen blindness. They don't want to know because knowing means admitting they've been fools, and the ego hates that more than poverty itself. The middle class doesn't fail because of lack of opportunity. They fail because of lack of restraint. They refuse to delay gratification and call it living in the moment. But here's what I've learned. You don't get rich by chasing comfort. You get rich by enduring discomfort intelligently. If you need every purchase to feel justified, you'll never be free. Let me talk about debt. Debt is like alcohol. 1 glass feels harmless, 2 makes you social, and by the 5th you're making stupid promises you can't keep. The middle class calls it leverage. I call it what it is, self-imposed servitude. They borrow to look successful instead of being successful. They think they're playing offense, but they're really cornered on defense, paying interest to people who are smarter than them. It's a transfer of wealth from the impatient to the patient. I've watched entire generations convince themselves that good debt exists. Let me be clear. Debt is only good when someone else owes it to you. Mortgage, student loan, car loan, credit card, these are the 4 horsemen of financial mediocrity. Optionality. That's what wealth really buys. The ability to walk away, to say no, to not care what the market, your boss, or the bank thinks. You can't have optionality when your life is pre-sold to creditors. The middle class has turned the word loan into a love language. They'll borrow for college, a wedding, furniture, even a vacation. Then they brag about their credit score like it's a badge of honor. Let me tell you a secret. Your credit score measures how well you've played by the lender's rules. It's not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of compliance. I've seen this movie before. In 1929, Americans borrowed to buy stocks. In 2008, they borrowed to buy homes. In both cases, when the music stopped, debtors were the ones left standing without chairs. The middle class still hasn't learned. They borrow today, believing tomorrow will be richer. I've never met a man who lost his house because he didn't have debt, but I've met thousands who lost everything because they had just a little too much. Debt doesn't just steal your money, it steals your calm, your time, your ability to think independently. When you owe someone money, you start filtering your decisions through fear. That fear quietly corrodes your judgment. And judgment is everything in life and investing. When you're leveraged, you can't be patient. You can't sit through volatility. You can't think long term. You can't even think straight. The middle class loves to say you have to take risks to grow. The irony is they think debt is the bridge to opportunity. In reality, it's a moat around their own prison. They decorate it with granite countertops, call it a dream home, and spend the next 30 years guarding the keys. Remember this, if you need to borrow money to look successful, you've already failed the test, because true wealth is silent, slow, and self-funded. The moment you need other people's money to maintain your image, you're not building freedom. Now let me talk about something even more insidious than debt, comfort. Comfort is the new poverty. Most people don't get trapped because they're dumb. They get trapped because they're comfortable enough not to change. The middle class loves comfort more than truth. They'll complain about inflation, debt, taxes, but not enough to actually do anything about it. A man earns $50,000 a year. He says, when I hit $100,000, I'll start saving. He hits $100,000 and suddenly life got more expensive. Then he says, when I hit $200,000, I'll finally invest. By then he's 45, tired, and still broke. The problem isn't his income, it's his thermostat. Every time his income warms up, he resets comfort to a higher level. He thinks progress means owning more stuff. But the more you own, the more you owe, in time, attention, and energy. Every new gadget, every new subscription, every new upgrade, they don't just cost money, they cost focus. And focus is the real capital of a rational mind. You can't think independently when your head is full of noise. The middle class has built an economy around their own laziness. They pay for fast food because cooking takes effort. They pay for streaming because boredom feels unbearable. They don't see it as laziness, they call it self-care. Meanwhile, every swipe, every click, every order funnels money to people who understand how comfort destroys discipline. If you make comfort your goal, someone smarter will sell it to you at a premium. People love to talk about passive income, but the truth is they're the passive income. I've spent my life watching people underestimate the cost of comfort. Comfort turns sharp minds into dull ones. It teaches you to tolerate mediocrity, to rationalize stagnation. You see, discomfort is the seed of growth. Every good decision I ever made started from irritation. I was irritated by ignorance, by waste, by stupidity. The middle class calls discomfort stress, and they medicate it, avoid it, outsource it. The rich call discomfort tuition. The middle class will endure 30 years of job anxiety, debt pressure, and financial stress, all to avoid 6 months of disciplined sacrifice. That's comfort addiction at its finest. I've learned that comfort is not a goal. It's a narcotic. Taken too long, it dulls your ambition. So if you want to stop being broke, start being uncomfortable on purpose. Read things you don't understand. Cut expenses that make you feel safe. Because the more you chase comfort, the more it costs you. And not just in dollars. It costs you the one thing that compounds faster than money, character. Let's talk about status. The middle class doesn't just want to live well. They want to look like they live better than everyone else. Most people don't buy a car. They buy attention. They don't buy a house. They buy approval. And that's why they'll always be poor. They're trying to purchase self-worth from people who don't care. I see people earning $50,000, wearing $10,000 on their wrist, financing the other $40,000 through a smiling salesman. They call it motivation. I call it insanity. The middle class lives by this unspoken rule. If I can look rich, maybe someday I'll feel rich. It never works that way. You can't buy confidence with consumption. I've met billionaires who drive old cars and live in modest homes, not because they're cheap, because they're free. They don't need to prove anything, and that's exactly why they stay rich. Social media made this disease terminal. Now everyone's a performer. The stage is your feed. The costume is your possessions. And the applause is fake but addictive. People don't measure success by wealth anymore. They measure it by envy. You're just running the same rat race in more expensive shoes. There's nothing wrong with nice things. But when they own you, when your identity depends on them, you've traded freedom for decoration. Here's a little test. If the market collapsed tomorrow and nobody could see what you own, would you still feel successful? The rich understand that true status doesn't come from display. It comes from control. Control over your time, your choices, your emotions. The middle class has the opposite. Warren once said, "You can't tell who's swimming naked until the tide goes out." I'd add this: you can't tell who's truly free until the applause stops. So stop performing. Stop chasing validation. Stop buying symbols and start buying options. Because when you live to impress, you'll always need an audience. Now let me address the sacred cow, home ownership. Nothing traps the middle class more beautifully than a house they call a dream. They say renting is throwing money away. I say so is paying interest for 30 years on something you barely own. The obsession with home ownership is one of the most effective financial sedatives ever invented. It keeps people working, borrowing, and staying put. When I was young, a house was shelter. Now it's a status symbol, an ego project, and a lifetime mortgage disguised as stability. The middle class will stretch every dollar, sign every paper, and handcuff themselves to a 30-year loan. Your home isn't an investment. It's an illiquid emotional liability with a roof. It doesn't produce cash flow. It demands it. Taxes, insurance, maintenance. The hidden costs alone could fund a small stock portfolio. And yet, people call it their greatest asset. Of course, owning a home can make sense if you can truly afford it, if it fits your life, not your ego. But that's not how most people buy. They buy the maximum the bank allows, not the minimum they can live with. The mortgage broker says, "You're approved for $500,000, and instead of thinking, maybe I should spend $3, they go full throttle. I've seen people live in million-dollar homes with $2,000 in the bank. That's not security. That's theater. Housing can be a great store of value if you buy it wisely, hold it long, and don't confuse it with income. But the middle class treats their house like an ATM. They refinance to pay for vacations. I once said the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Owning too much house is the perfect interruption. It ties up your capital, your energy, and your freedom. The rich don't brag about their homes. They brag about the deals they passed on. They understand that liquidity and flexibility are worth more than granite countertops. If you really want to be rich, you don't need a bigger house. You need a smaller ego, because a humble home with peace and savings beats a mansion with debt and anxiety every single time. Now let's talk about investing. The middle class loves to say, "I'm investing." What they really mean is they're speculating badly. They buy what's popular, not what's valuable. They follow trends, not logic, and they call it strategy. I've watched people pour their savings into crypto, meme stocks, and IPOs they can't even pronounce, just because someone on YouTube said it's the next big thing. It's the same psychology that made people chase tulips in 1637 and tech stocks in 1999. The middle class is obsessed with getting rich quickly because they never built the patience to get rich slowly. They want Buffett's returns without Buffett's temperament. They want Munger's wisdom without Munger's boredom. Wealth isn't built by genius. It's built by sitting still while everyone else loses their minds. But sitting still doesn't look exciting on social media. Most people don't have an investment problem. They have an impatience problem. They want the thrill of activity, the dopamine hit of doing something. But activity and results are not the same thing. I once said, the big money is not in the buying and selling, but in the waiting. And that's exactly why the middle class never sees it. They'll tell you they diversified. What they really did was spread ignorance across multiple positions. They think diversification protects them. Understanding does. You can own a single great business for decades and become wealthy, or you can own 50 mediocre ones and stay average forever. But mediocrity feels safer. The truth is simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference in something you understand. Wait patiently while compounding works quietly in your favor. The middle class hears that and says, that's too boring. Then they lose money chasing something exciting. If you need excitement, go to Las Vegas. The irony is the middle class has access to more information than any generation before them, and yet they've never been dumber with money because they mistake information for wisdom. You want to know why the rich get richer? Because they stay calm when everyone else loses control. They don't react to headlines, tweets, or trends. They think in decades, not days. The middle class can't do that. They don't have the temperament. Let me tell you about the income trap. The middle class worships income like it's salvation. They think if they can just earn a little more, everything will finally click. Because the problem isn't the size of the paycheck. It's the size of the appetite. You can't out-earn stupidity. Every raise becomes a new bill. Every bonus becomes a new toy. Every success becomes a new excuse to spend more. I've met doctors earning $500,000 a year who are broke. I've met teachers earning $50,000 who are financially free. Discipline scales better than income. But the middle class treats lifestyle like a scoreboard. Every dollar earned is immediately converted into comfort. And comfort, as I've said before, kills growth. The I deserve it mindset is the most expensive phrase in any language. It's the adult version of I want it now. They work harder, earn more, and still live paycheck to paycheck. Let me put it bluntly. If your income rises and your savings rate doesn't, you've learned nothing. People like to quote Warren and me when it's convenient, but they ignore the boring part, the discipline. We didn't get rich by earning the most. We got rich by keeping the most. You don't build wealth by addition. You build it by subtraction, subtracting stupidity, ego, and unnecessary noise. Most people have a spending reflex instead of a saving reflex. When income increases, they instinctively upgrade their lifestyle. Here's what the middle class never grasps. Income is temporary. Habits are permanent. A good habit will make you rich on any income. That's why I say the goal isn't to make more money. It's to need less, because needing less gives you options. You can't save what you don't respect. And the middle class doesn't respect money. They use it to display emotion, not logic. If you want to escape the income trap, stop asking, how can I earn more? Start asking, how can I need less? Because once you control your needs, your income stops being your master and starts being your tool. Now, let me talk about the tax nobody sees. The middle class doesn't just pay taxes to the government. They pay a much larger one, the ignorance tax. Every time they sign a bad loan, swipe a high-interest credit card, chase a dumb investment, or buy insurance they don't need, they're paying it. Ignorance is expensive, but it doesn't send you a bill. People love to complain about the wealthy paying less in taxes. But the truth is, the rich don't avoid taxes. They avoid ignorance. They read the fine print. They understand the rules. They know how the system works because they took the time to learn it. You know what ignorance looks like in real life? It's the person who buys a brand new car with a 7-year loan. It's the investor who can't explain what they own, but checks the price 5 times a day. You don't have to be brilliant to avoid it. You just have to be curious. But curiosity requires humility. The market punishes arrogance, but it absolutely crushes ignorance. I once said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. That's not a metaphor. Most people don't even know the basic laws of compounding, inflation, or opportunity cost. They can name every celebrity scandal of the month, but not their own annual expenses. That's why they get blindsided by the same traps over and over. You can't protect what you don't understand, and the middle class refuses to understand. Financial ignorance creates dependence. Dependence creates fear. Fear creates obedience. That's the real hierarchy. The rich spend years learning how to make money multiply. The middle class spends years figuring out how to spend it faster, and then they call the results unfair. Knowledge compounds faster than capital, and the middle class never compounds either one. They think financial education is optional. The irony is, in the age of free information, ignorance is now a choice. Every answer is online. Every book is one click away. So they'll keep paying, quietly, endlessly, through bad deals, high fees, and missed opportunities. That's the ignorance tax. And it's the only tax with no deductions, no refunds, and no sympathy. Now let me talk about the deadliest sin. If you want to understand why the middle class stays broke, forget economics. Study envy. Envy is the most contagious disease on earth. And unlike the flu, it doesn't make you sick overnight. It kills you slowly in installments. The middle class doesn't compete with the rich. They compete with each other, and they all lose. This isn't economics, it's psychology, and very stupid psychology. Envy is the tax you pay for caring about what doesn't matter. The middle class can't build wealth because they're too busy keeping up appearances. They think prosperity is a competition. Warren and I used to joke that envy is the only sin that doesn't even make you feel good. At least greed, lust, and gluttony have a payoff. Envy is pure pain. Social media made envy scalable. Every scroll is a reminder that someone else seems richer, happier, thinner, younger. So people spin, chase, and exhaust themselves trying to catch up to images that aren't even real. The middle class doesn't need higher incomes. They need lower envy. Envy forces bad decisions. It makes you buy what you don't need, invest where you don't understand, and waste time proving things nobody remembers. Envy is like a leech. It drains your focus from what you can control and attaches it to what you can't. There will always be someone richer, always someone luckier, always someone younger. If that bothers you, you'll never know peace. And peace, ironically, is what wealth is for. The rich don't waste energy competing on vanity metrics. They're too busy compounding. The middle class, meanwhile, is too busy comparing. Comparison makes you emotional. Emotion makes you stupid. And stupidity makes you poor. That's the chain. Envy doesn't just cost money. It costs clarity. It fogs your mind until you can't tell the difference between genuine ambition and desperate imitation. If you want to live better than most people, you have to think opposite of most people. But envy keeps you in the herd, and the herd never gets rich, because the moment you stop needing to look richer, you start becoming richer. The cure to envy is gratitude and discipline, and the middle class has neither in abundance. Now let me tell you about the final trap. The deadliest trap of all isn't debt, envy, or spending. It's thinking you're fine. Most of the middle class isn't desperate. They're comfortable, and that's exactly why they'll never change. They confuse stability with security. A steady job, a paid mortgage, a little savings. They think that's enough. I've seen this story for 80 years. People climb just high enough to stop worrying, and then they stop thinking. They stop learning. The middle class trusts comfort like a religion. They think because life looks normal, they're safe. But all it takes is one job loss, one illness, one market crash, and that comfort evaporates overnight. I've always said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. The middle class refuses to look. They live financially blind, assuming tomorrow will resemble today. Most people will never retire, not because they didn't work hard, but because they never built anything that worked without them. They spend their entire lives feeding other people's machines. They mistake motion for progress. They mistake income for wealth. They mistake appearance for success. And they mistake comfort for control. That's how smart people end up trapped, not by failure, but by good enough. The rich aren't necessarily smarter. They're just more paranoid about staying stupid. They keep learning. If you ever want to escape the traps, you have to admit you're still capable of falling into them. Humility is your only defense. Every fortune starts with one decision: to stop being ignorant, comfortable, and average. Not tomorrow. Not when the market's better. Stop chasing luxury. Start building liquidity. Stop showing off. Start showing discipline. Stop confusing consumption with progress, because they're not the same thing, and pretending they are has cost millions of people their financial freedom. The path is simple, brutal, but simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest what you save. Avoid stupidity. Repeat for decades. That's it. No secret formula. No next big thing. Just discipline compounded over time. But most won't do it because simplicity feels insulting to people who want shortcuts. That's why they'll stay broke, proudly, stubbornly, and loudly. The middle class keeps waiting for a miracle. The rich simply stop making excuses. They stop blaming the economy, their parents, their education, the government. They looked in the mirror and made different choices. And those choices, repeated consistently over decades, created outcomes that look like luck to people who don't understand cause and effect. You see, wealth isn't mysterious. It's just unpopular. The habits that build it are boring. The timeline is longer than most people's attention span. But mathematics doesn't care about your feelings. Compound interest doesn't negotiate. Time doesn't wait. So ask yourself honestly, are you building freedom or just decorating your cage? Because the bars don't disappear when you call them goals. And until you see the trap for what it is, you'll keep walking in circles. When I look back on 80 years of watching human behavior, I see the same patterns repeat. The middle class has always existed, and it has always stayed middle because it refuses to think differently. Warren and I didn't become successful because we were the smartest people in the room. We became successful because we were willing to be the most boring. We read more. We thought longer. We waited patiently. We avoided stupidity more carefully than we chased brilliance. That's the real secret, if you can even call it that. Avoid stupidity. It sounds simple because it is simple. But simple and easy are not the same thing. Most people know what they should do. They just can't bring themselves to do it consistently. Knowledge without action is just expensive entertainment. And the middle class has turned personal finance into a spectator sport. They watch videos about investing while their savings account stays empty. If I could leave you with one thought, it would be this. You are not trapped by your circumstances. You're trapped by your decisions. And decisions can change. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need more time or more money or more luck. You need different thinking because better thinking creates better decisions. Better decisions create better habits. And better habits, compounded over time, create a completely different life. The middle class will keep doing what they've always done. They'll keep complaining, spending, and hoping for a different result. But you don't have to. You can invert. You can ask the right question. Not, how do I get rich? But, how do I avoid staying broke? Not, what should I buy? But, what should I avoid? Not how can I look successful, but how can I become free? Those questions change everything. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've watched fortunes built and destroyed. I've watched brilliant people make stupid choices, and average people make extraordinary progress. And the difference is never talent. It's always temperament, discipline, and the willingness to endure discomfort in the short term for freedom in the long term. The middle class trap is real, but it's not permanent. It's a choice you make every single day, with every dollar, with every decision. With every moment, you choose comfort over growth or growth over comfort. So the question isn't whether you can escape. The question is whether you will, because the path is clear. The math works. The principles are proven. The only variable left is you. Will you keep decorating your cage? Or will you finally walk out? The door's been open the whole time. Most people just never look for it. Now you know where it is. What you do next is entirely up to you, and that's exactly how it should be. Because freedom, real freedom, starts the moment you stop blaming circumstances and start changing decisions. That's when the middle class trap loses its power, and that's when you finally start living like you actually understand what wealth means. Not the money, the optionality, the calm, the ability to say no, the ability to think clearly without fear. That's what